What's happening, everybody? On today's show, we're going to catch up on a ton of news going on around the conference ahead of SEC Week 7 as Mark Stoops calls out Kentucky fans. Jalen Milroe brags on Jermaine Burton. Some injury updates across the SEC. And Jimbo Fisher says it's not time to panic. A Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Everybody, welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. Go download the Game Time app, create an account, use our promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. We got plenty to jump into. Let's dive right into it, and let's go around the conference.
Boots out to the right. Intercepted. Takes the handoff. What a catch!
Around the conference.
And we start over at Kentucky as Mark Stoops calling out the fans of Kentucky to, quote, donate more to help build Kentucky's roster up with playmakers like Georgia has on his weekly radio show on Monday evening. Mark Stoops straight up talking about NIL and how that has helped recruiting over at Georgia and some of the other top programs. He said, quote, fans have the right, I give it to them, to criticize us. He said, I just encourage them to donate more because that's what those dudes are doing. I can promise you, Georgia, they bought some pretty good players. You're allowed to these days. We could use some help. Stoops went on to say that fans should pony up if they're angry with the win or with the loss to a team like Georgia. He said, that's what they look like. You know what I mean? When you have 85 of them, I encourage anybody that's disgruntled to pony up some more. So, look, Kentucky fans doing their fair part, donating to collectives and stuff, but Mark Stoops saying you got to give more if you want some of those big 4 or 5 stars like Georgia has. There's a reason why they've been near the top, if not the very top of the recruiting rankings the last handful of years with Kirby Smart. But Mark Stoops taking a direct shot at Kentucky fans, directly or indirectly, take it as negative, take it as positive, whatever, but saying that, hey, you got to pay more money if you want us to get some of these big dogs like Georgia has and want us to play on that level. Kentucky just has not had the greatest success against top teams. They have had great success going to 7 straight bowl appearances and a couple of double-digit season wins under Mark Stoops, but against the big dogs, Kentucky has now lost 14 games in a row to Georgia, 7 in a row to Alabama. And again, they've been a team on the rise. They need to bounce back this week and kind of reset, but they get Missouri this weekend. Stoops was asked about on his coach's show why Kentucky's not past the hump yet in trying to beat the Georgias and the Alabamas. He said, if you think this is easy, step up. Reminding folks, hey, look, this isn't the easiest thing in the world to beat teams like Georgia and Alabama. Now, the Wildcats were undefeated going into this game against Georgia this past week. They do have the big resume win against Florida. But Mark Stoops saying he hopes this was a wake-up call for his team. He said, we've got to get back to being who we were. Somebody shot me an article that talked about Georgia and their approach, and they knew that it was going to be a physical game, and they preached it all week. It just reaffirmed what I tell my team all the time about Tuesdays and Wednesdays. 3 or 4 of their players are sitting there talking about how the game was won throughout the week. It was their most physical Tuesday. They were prepared that way. They had that mindset. They answered the challenge. We did not. We've got to get back to being who we are and having a great week of prep. Again, Stoops and the Wildcats getting ready for Missouri this weekend. It stinks for one of those teams. A week ago, we were talking about Missouri and Kentucky both undefeated. After this weekend, one of those teams is going to be on a 2-game losing streak. Over at Alabama, Jermaine Burton having a career game this past week in the win over Texas A&M, and Jalen Milroe, his quarterback, giving high praise to Jermaine Burton. He said, I just saw something in his eyes starting the week off. He was hungry. He was ready to go. You didn't even have to ask him if he was locked in. You could just tell with how well he practiced and how committed he was to the game plan. He said that all factored into the success. that was present this weekend. Milro said that believes the game could be the start of something big for Burton. He said, we all know he can make plays. We're going to put him in position to do so. And the focus point for now is just being a successful offense. But we know Jermaine Burton is a big factor for us to be successful. Now, Milro had a couple of ill-advised passes throughout this year at Alabama, particularly a interception this past week. And Milro talked about a couple of the missed opportunities this past weekend. He said, a few of these plays still hurt me. Few have not been smart plays by me. Times I should just hand the ball off. He said, definitely something I can build off of and learn off of because that was not a part of the play. But despite some of those miscues, Milro did put together a really good game against A&M. 321 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a 26-20 win for the Tide. So Nick Saban said he likes what he's seen from his defense so far, and linebacker Deontay Lawson, a big part of that. Nick Saban saying this week, he's played really well. We really miss him when he's not out there. Did miss a game. He said his leadership is great. I think he helps everybody else play better with his communication, signal calling, and his performance has been really good. He's a very contentious guy, good athlete, and has the ability to make plays. So far this year, Lawson, with 12 tackles and 2 sacks, had a career-high 10 against South Florida a couple weeks ago. Had a big game against A&M, so see what Deontay Lawson continues to do for the Tide. One more in Alabama. Nick Saban asked to give a evaluation on his coordinators, Tommy Rees and Kevin Steele, midway through the season. He said, I'm not going to publicly comment. We're happy with the coaches we have. We're trying to get better. We're all working hard together to get better. Pleased with the effort that everyone has given, trying to give input to fix those things. Everyone is responsible for deficiencies as a team. He said, that's kind of on me. So we will see at the end of the year if both Tommy Rees and Kevin Steele are back next year at Alabama. Of course, kind of always a revolving door there with the assistant coaches there under Nick Saban. Reese Davis of ESPN said he saw something different in this Alabama team from previous ones. He said on Paul Finebaum on Monday, he said, Alabama has entered virtually every season as close to a finished product. Now there's tweaking and there's honing and there's compensating for injuries, but the ceiling is not very far away from where Alabama starts typically. This one is different. He said Alabama had room to grow and improve and still has that. We're just not used to seeing this. And it appears that they've taken some significant steps in that direction. If they continue to do so, maybe by late November, early December, they can be that dominant Alabama team we're used to. But at least for these first couple weeks, they've had a lot of growing pains to go through. The good thing is just keep winning, right? I mean, the Texas game aside, Alabama has found ways to not play great, but still find ways to win games. And that is what the most important thing is. Over Georgia, Kirby Smart talking on Monday about his thoughts on Vanderbilt having a pretty good offense, and they're going to be facing that this weekend. Kirby asked what stands out. He said they have really good wideouts. I didn't realize until I was watching all their games yesterday how fast they are at wide receiver. Will Shepard currently leading the team with 550 receiving yards, 35 catches, 8 touchdowns. Jaden McGowan has 300 receiving yards, and their freshman London Humphreys, 12 catches, 300 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Kirby Smart talking about, A.J. Swan being out with injury. Ken Seals has done a pretty good job getting the ball to those receivers the last couple of weeks. He said they've had some injuries up front, had some guys going in and out of the lineup, but Seals buys more time. He's mobile. He's able to highlight the players they have and have some really good wide receivers. So we'll see what Ken Seals is able to do with those wide receivers against Georgia's defensive backs. Meanwhile, Georgia offensive tackle Amarius Mims, former 5-star, he underwent tightrope surgery in September. Kirby offering an update on him. He said Amarius is right where we think he should be. He's got the same protocol that Lawson Lucky's had, Cash has had, James Cook had. We've had a lot of tightrope surgeries. He's right on schedule. Doesn't have a specific timetable for his return, but believes a timeline of past players' recoveries would put him in line to maybe make that return here in a couple of weeks. So we'll see with Amarius Mims. They could certainly use him there on the offensive line. Now, Kirk Herbstreit released his top performing coaches of the week for week 6. And he's got a couple of assistant coaches there, including Georgia defensive coordinator Glenn Schumann. Said he thinks he's done a tremendous job there defensively for Georgia. A couple other SEC notes. Let's get over to LSU. They are looking to build off of their road win against Missouri. They will be hosting Auburn this weekend. Brian Kelly calling them a dangerous team. And we'll see what Auburn is able to do. We know Hugh Freeze always going to have some tricks up his sleeve when it comes to offensive output, although we haven't seen it at a high level so far this year. But Brian Kelly giving some injury updates. He said quarterback Jaden Daniels was a full participant in practice Tuesday, did suffer a rib injury against Missouri last week. He also mentioned O-lineman Charles Turner, linebacker Omar Spates, and wide receiver Aaron Anderson are all listed as probable for the game this weekend. Wide receiver Chris Hilton is doubtful. He missed last week's game. Now, Brian Kelly also sharing that safety Greg Brooks, who is battling brain cancer, has been transferred to St. Jude's Research Hospital in Memphis for ongoing treatment for his cancer. And Brian Kelly said, we're just so grateful for the support that everybody throughout the entire community and country has stepped up and embraced this kid. Obviously, thoughts and prayers every day for Greg. He's a strong man. We're hoping his next surgery allows him to begin the next challenge of battling cancer. Greg Brooks, the Victory Fund set up for him on LSU's website if anyone would like to donate to that. But again, we had Greg on the show back in the spring. Certainly a great kid, and wishing him the best of luck in his path here. One more note over at Auburn. Hugh Freeze talking about Peyton Thorne and his performance against Georgia, which wasn't great, although Auburn was able to stay in the game. And Hugh Freeze saying it wasn't all in the quarterback play. He said, we got to get him his tools. They got to get fixed around him. Basically saying a lot of the wide receivers, the offensive line, all of that's got to be clicking for Peyton Thorne to do his thing. He was 10 of 19 passing for just 82 yards with an interception in the game. Hugh Freeze said, I'm certainly not saying there were all drops, but there were chances for us to make plays at the wide receiver spot to put our players in position to get points. We're just trying to build off of that. Thought we made some really good throws, but got to get better there. So Hugh Freeze going into Tiger Stadium this weekend. We'll see what Auburn is able to do against LSU. And we'll get to more news and notes going on around the conference in just a bit. But thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. All that and more coming your way in just a sec. First, I want to remind you guys this episode is presented to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. Look, testing your skills on PrizePicks this football season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you could turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. PrizePicks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. No time at all. They got quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types that are what make PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. This week on PrizePicks, looking at some of the SEC games coming in this weekend. Joe Milton, I kind of like him more than his passing total. He's averaging 230 passing per game. He's got a big one against A&M this weekend. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use our promo code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. And as PrizePicks, it is daily fantasy sports made easy. Also, this episode is presented to you by our friends over at the Game Time app. Look, you shouldn't have to worry when you are buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way for you to buy tickets for all the sporting events you want to go to with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They are obsessed with finding ways for you to help save money on your tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event. They got zone deals. You pick the section, and Game Time picks the seats for an average of 18% savings. And the Game Time guarantee means you will always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Go download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, roll along here, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys so much for making us your first listen every day. We got more news and notes to get into going on around the conference. So let's dive right back into it. We start over at Texas A&M as they're traveling to Knoxville, Tennessee this weekend to take on the Vols. And Jimbo Fisher meeting with reporters this week, talking about the Vols and their strength being their offense. He talked about their trio of running backs, Dylan Sampson, Jalen Wright, Jabari Small. Tennessee's rush offense averaging 231 yards per game, number one in the SEC, also averaging 6.3 yards per carry. Jimbo said they're a very good team. They got that three-back system. Their running backs all have juice. They're strong. You think of them as fast, but they're 210, 215 pounds. Those guys are all really good players. Their receiver, he's got juice, Squirrel White. It's like a squirrel trying to get that guy, but he plays physical for a guy his size. He can run. The receivers outside are tall. And as for the defense, under Tim Banks, Jimbo saying defensively they got rush guys on the edge. James Pierce, Roman Harrison could bring it. Aaron Beasley, playmakers all over the place. Physical up front with Amari Thomas, and those guys and their safeties tackle well. Jimbo saying after their loss to Alabama, it's not quite time to hit the panic button. He said, you saw a hurt locker room after the loss, a disappointed locker room, but you didn't see a dejected or quitting locker room. Our kids have character, and they have heart. So Jimbo saying don't expect them to throw in the towel and just quit after their loss to Alabama, and obviously putting themselves behind the eight ball here for the battle for the SEC West. So expect A&M to go give their best effort up in Knoxville. Now over at Tennessee, Josh Heupel talking about what impresses him about Texas A&M and their quarterback, Max Johnson. He said he can throw the ball well downfield. He's able to scramble when there's pressure on him. He's able to make plays when they break down. Heupel noted Johnson has played a lot of football in his life. Of course, started a bunch of games over at LSU. Said he does a really good job of taking care of the football. Now with Johnson there at A&M, Heupel said the Vols have to do a great job of maxing out guys on the perimeter. So we'll see what they are able to do there in the Tennessee A&M game. Now after their bye week, Tennessee looking to get a little bit healthier. Heupel saying on Monday expects cornerback Danico Slaughter to be ready to go against A&M. Also said wide receiver Dante Thornton practiced with the team on Monday. Thornton coming back would be big, of course, in the absence of Brew McCoy. And Coach Heupel going on to say, guy represents everything that is good about Tennessee football, being Eric Berry. He will be honored this week by the Vol faithful there in Knoxville. He will be inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame at the end of the season. Over at Arkansas, Sam Pitman admitting Arkansas football not doing a good enough job of protecting up front, particularly for their quarterback, KJ Jefferson. He said, I do believe KJ could really thrive and shine if we just protected him a little bit better. If you notice in the games, if he has protection, we're able to make the throw and catch it well. When he doesn't, not so much. He said, I think that's with everybody, but I think he wants to be Superman. I think he's probably pressing a little bit too much right now to make a play. But yes, that offensive line for Arkansas has got to improve if they're going to come off this losing skid anytime soon. Of course, tough battle getting Alabama coming up next. That defense is filthy. Over at Florida, Billy Napier and team, they'll be taking on South Carolina this week. Gators coming off of a win against Vanderbilt after they lost to Kentucky the week earlier. But the Gators are 0-2 on the road this year. And this week, Billy Napier talking about kind of making some things, some adjustments to focus more when they're on the road. He said, we have to accept the challenge, go out and play better on the road. They just have not responded for whatever reason away from home this year. So Napier added the Gators will arrive earlier than usual in Columbia on Friday, as well as getting to the stadium sooner on Saturday. He said focus on getting better sleep on Wednesday will also be something they will do. So we'll see if that helps the Gators coming into this week. Few other SEC notes. Paul Finebaum giving his opinion on the current state of the SEC through the first couple of weeks. He was on with Cole Kubelik and Greg McElroy on their show in Birmingham on Jocks FM. And conference has 6 ranked teams with Georgia at number 1. But Paul Finebaum said, look, I think from a top-heavy standpoint, a lot of the perception is Alabama. We talk about the playoff predictor and who's in the top this or that. Alabama's still not there. Alabama hasn't been there for so long. It was just automatic. Georgia became the second automatic, so that hurts a little bit. The question has moved from does the league get two? Does the league get one team in? That's a big shift. See, Tennessee's emerged here in recent years, so many questions about them. Florida's not been great. They're a shell of their former selves, and there's some very bad teams at the bottom. It makes for competitive games, but they don't help with the overall reputation of the league. Lastly, Finebaum said, when you look out to the Pacific Northwest this week, and you have a game like Oregon-Washington, USC, as flawed as they are, they're still playing marquee games every week. In Colorado, a lot of people are noticing them. The SEC is just not there on the national stage, getting that respect. And a big part of it was those non-conference losses early in the season, but Paul Finebaum, I kind of agree with him to a certain extent with some of his points there. But thank you guys so much for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. When we return, we will get to some of the players named to SEC Players of the Week. And also we got some game times and networks for SEC Week 8. We'll get to that in just a second. But first, I want to remind you guys this episode presented to you by our friends over at Jace Medical. Look, the Jace case, providing 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jace case is to go fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of their board-certified physicians. You can get ongoing care from their physicians on any treatment-related questions, doctor-created, doctor-recommended. Don't be caught unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jace Medical is offering the Jace case, providing 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use to give you peace of mind that you're not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jace Medical makes sure you have it in hand. Jace Medical is simple. Handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Get $20 off these life-saving antibiotics today from Jace Medical by using our code LOCKEDON at checkout at jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Go check them out today. All right, roll along here, Locked On SEC. And before we call it a show, it was an exciting weekend of college football this past weekend in SEC Week 6. And let's get to some of our players of the week announced by the SEC. And first and foremost, over at Georgia, Carson Beck named a co-offensive player of the week, 389 yards, 4 touchdowns in their win over Kentucky. He was very good, completing 28 of 35 passes, as the Bulldogs had an easy 51-13 victory. The co-offensive player of the week went to Jaden Daniels over at LSU. He had 259 passing yards, 130 rushing yards, and 4 total touchdowns in LSU's win over Mizzou. So very well earned there. Other SEC guys making the list. Linebacker Ashanti Seastrunk over at Ole Miss. He was the conference's defensive player of the week. 9 tackles and an interception in the Rebels' win over Arkansas. Special teams player of the week, Alabama's Will Reichard nailed a 39-yard field goal in the win over Texas A&M. He also took over punting responsibilities after their punter James Burnett went down. Actually punted very well. You would have never known the difference. LSU's Emory Jones named offensive lineman of the week, as the Tigers had a 274 rushing yards in their win over Missouri. Alabama's Justin Aboigbe was the defensive lineman of the week, had 5 tackles and a quarterback hurry. Also had 1.5 sacks, including one that resulted in a safety. Georgia kicker Peyton Woodring was named co-freshman of the week. He was 6 for 6 on PATs, including a 42-yarder during Georgia's 51-13 win. And Florida wide receiver Arliss Boardingham was the co-freshman of the week, 99 yards and a touchdown on 7 catches. I think is he a tight end, wide receiver, whatever they list him out. Boardingham, name you got to get to know. All right, a few other tidbits here. SEC Network's crew of Darinoka, Chris Doring, Ben Watson, they were talking about who are the league's top teams, and everybody kind of agreed. Number 1 and number 2 is Georgia and Alabama. But what about the next couple teams? Chris Doring's had Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and Kentucky as his number 3, 4, 5 in there. Ben Watson rated Alabama number 2 behind Georgia, but he did say the Crimson Tide are ascending because of what Jalen Milroe has been doing. LSU, of course, with the play of Jaden Daniels, he said he's got him as his number 3 team, followed by Mizzou and Ole Miss. Look, I think we could do a whole full hour-long show debating who is the 3rd, 4th, and 5th best teams in the SEC this year. Look, Alabama, I get it. They've got the one loss against Texas, and they've done okay. They've survived, but I'm not ready to crown Alabama downright, absolutely clear as day, the number 2 best team in the SEC right now. They still got some work to do, so we'll see how it shakes out the next couple of weeks. And the SEC, they announced game times and TV networks for their Week 8 slate, which will take place next week. So not this weekend, but next week. And here's how it shapes up. We will have Mississippi State at Arkansas as the early game, noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central on ESPN. In the afternoon, we will get Tennessee at Alabama. That will be the CBS 2:30, 3:30 slot. Then we'll get South Carolina at Missouri. That one will be on the SEC Network in the afternoon. And then in the evening on ESPN, we will get Ole Miss at Auburn on ESPN. And then the SEC Network will actually have Army at LSU, kind of an interesting one for the Tigers here late in the year to get a non-conference game against Army, who they should beat, but it's always tough to prepare for some of these triple option teams and teams that run very different offenses than you're used to in the middle of SEC play. So be interested to see how all those teams perform this weekend before we get into those games next week. But if Tennessee beats A&M this week, man, is the stage set for a big one between Tennessee and Alabama next week. A revenge game for Alabama, a game for Tennessee where, man, they finally broke the camel's back. They finally got over the hump and beat Alabama. Can they do it 2 years in a row? We'll see. Jalen Milroe's got to continue to play better, and Josh Heupel's crew has to continue to improve defensively. We'll get into all that next week, and throughout this week, we will continue to prepare you guys for SEC Week 6. We'll preview a lot of the action as we roll along. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. And shout out to our everydayers coming back every day here on the show. We will talk to you guys tomorrow and throughout this week right here on Locked On SEC. Have a great day out there, everybody.